Great, here we are ready to continue our learning in Hishtapchut HaNefesh. We're on the 15th day, that's next week, the 8th day of the month of Shvat, heading into Tu B'Shvat. Next week we're going to have a Tu B'Shvat Seder, Bezrat Hashem, at this time, so maybe we'll move our learning to Monday or Wednesday. We might be able to do that, but Tuesday, Bezrat Hashem, everybody's invited to the Tu B'Shvat Seder at Kol Rina that they've invited me to be the leader of the Seder, although we cringe at the word leader, but Bezrat Hashem, it should be fun, it should be interesting, and so everybody's invited on Tu B'Shvat at Kol Rina. In the meantime, here we are, learning in Hishtapchut HaNefesh. Before we start learning, we like to make the Hishtapchut to the Tzadikim. Hareini mikasher etzmi v'atzmenu b'limud Torah zeh l'kol hatzadikim ha'ametim shebedreinu l'kol hatzadikim ha'ametim shochnei afar kadoshim asher b'tzeim afar Rabbeinu kadosh tzadik yisod olam nachal leveim mikol chochma Rebbe Nachman ben Fege Nachman human schusam yagenu l'kol Yisrael. Amen. May it be Hashem your will that this learning should go towards healing for Chaya bat Bea, for Tila Racha bat Sarah, for Friend David's son-in-law Tzvi ben Esther, I believe, for Henya Machlis, Shalom Arsh.
Yeah, the whole family.
Shalom Arsh's family, the family that was in the car accident. Oh, world, and also may it be that people who are plagued by doubts should be given clarity to recognize the simple truth of the Torah and to have faith in the simple truth of the Torah, that it is the divine will and the divine truth, and even if we can't understand, and there are many things in the Torah that we certainly cannot understand and does challenge the faith, but that's the whole point of faith. And may it be will that please Hashem that those who are challenged by doubts should come to realize that the main weapon for fighting the doubts, which is the battle against Amalek, is the weapon of prayer, and we're learning about that weapon, how to use that weapon here, the art of Hitbodedut. And we're learning now in chapter 28, which is Koach, which is appropriate for what we're talking about. Koach, may Hashem give us the strength to stay in our simple faith in face of these attacks from intellectual arguments that basically say, I don't understand, so it must not be true. I don't understand how the Torah could say this, and so it must not be divine, God forbid. May we be able to stand into that, have the strength in that. Koach, 28. He says, Amar, Im haya adam zochel lishmo hashiros v'tishbachos shel ha'asavim, if a person could merit to hear the songs and praises of the grasses, that the grass, and I'm not talking about the songs and praises that people say after smoking grass, I'm talking about the grasses themselves, that they have their own song. How each and every blade of grass sings song to Hashem, bli shum pniya, without any ulterior motive, uvli shum machshavas chutz klal, or without any extraneous thought, anything that's not directly having to do with the awareness and relationship with Hashem. Kama yafeh v'na'eh kesheshomi mesashira shalahem. How beautiful and pleasant to be able to hear their song. Valke, now that's a very interesting thing he says there, by the way. He says if a person would merit to hear it, how each blade of grass is singing its song, and then he says how pleasant and nice, how beautiful and pleasant it is when hearing that song, which seems to imply that he was hearing it. Because he doesn't say it would be. He says how nice it is to hear those songs. So I'm going to say that means that he probably heard it. Based on a lot of things Rebbe Nachman says, it's reasonable to say this. And therefore, it's very good to go out into the fields and to serve Hashem with yira, with fear. And that's another very interesting thing that there's been recent discussion about doubts and things about Hashem as king. I can relate to God as Father and all nice, but I can't relate to God as king and judge and harshness. But there's a human experience called yira that Hashem wants us to have, and that's the truth is they're right. Hashem really is only good. However, Hashem says, I also want you to have this experience called yira, which when you have yira, when you have the fear of lower fear, which is punishment, that can develop into the experience of true awe. And awe is yirat haromamut, which is actually the interface of love and awe. And he says in this language, Rebbe Nachman actually said this in Yiddish, he says, Im ezer git frum zu sein zwischen sie. Again, it's very good to be amongst the grasses. Uli hisbode al pnei hasadeh and gidulei haaretz. And to make oneself alone with Hashem, to talk out your heart in the field, amongst the vegetation, the things that grow from the land. And to spill out his conversation before Hashem in truth. By the way, in truth, that means not only that we're speaking the truth, but that we're really being connected, that we're saying the truth. We're speaking out the real truth, the deep essence of what's going on, who we are, and what we're made of, and what are our strengths that Hashem has given us, what are our flaws that Hashem has given us. All these things are about speaking to Hashem in truth. And also, we can see that Rebbe Nachman talked about in the book of Conversations of Rebbe Nachman, Sichos Haran, Shamar Gamken Shetov Yoseh Sheisbodedus Yem Mechutz La'ir B'Mekom Asavim. He says it's actually better when a person does Bodedut than to do it outside the city in a place of grasses, in a place of vegetation. Ki ha'asavim gormim sheyisoder halev, because the grasses, the nature, causes an arousal of the heart. So it's good to go out and be in the fields, and we've been talking about trying to get some sort of vehicle and maybe get a group of us. There's people that do this. They have a van and they have a group of people that they go out every at least once a week or so, and they go out to the forest, they go out to the fields, and they spread apart, and everybody goes out and does their own hibudin. It's a very powerful, wonderful, beautiful experience. I invite us to all to make efforts towards that end, to do that, to go out to the fields and the forests. Soon. Any comments or thoughts about 28? What we just learned. Nothing. Let's go on. 29. Kaftet Amar. Rebbe Nachman said. צריך כל אדם לצעוק להשם יזברך ולסע ליבו אליו יזברך כאילו הוא באמצע הים תלוי על חוט השערה. This is a major teaching, I find it, in my humble opinion, that a person needs to cry out to Hashem and to lift his heart to Him as if he was in the middle of the ocean, hanging on by a string, the thickness of a hair. The ruach se'ara so'er ad lev hashamayim is in the ocean, and the storm is the tempest is blasting unto the heart of heaven. Ad she'ein yodin ma lasos, because in such a situation, imagine it. Take a second right now. Close your eyes and imagine if you are actually in the middle of the water and there's a storm raging and there's nobody around. You're being sucked out to the ocean by the tide, by the current, and you're holding on. There's a little piece of rope that somehow is attached to maybe a tree on the land or something, and you're holding on, and there's nobody there, or you don't know if anybody's there. You don't know what to do. V'kimat she'en panai afilu litzok, and the water is raging, and it's and every time you try to take a breath, the water comes in your mouth and it's salty, and you can barely even conjure up the strength and the ability. You're so busy trying to stay afloat. You're so busy trying to not get sucked under the surface that you can barely even come to scream. But it's really, there's no other choice. You don't have any other advice in such a situation other than to lift up your heart and lift your eyes and your heart to Hashem. Because a person is in great danger in this world, in danger of being swept aside by foreign thoughts of of atheism that are in the world, that God forbid people actually can come to the conclusion that there's no God or that God is not active in the moment. And these are dangerous things that can sweep a person out from the purpose of why we're here in this world. So we have to learn how to scream to Hashem in such a way. We have to know that that's what's going on. We have to be a person who can scream when a person is plagued by doubts, like some of the people that we know of in this world. There's a whole discussion going on in the community that one of the educators has expressed that he doesn't really believe in God, not the way we traditionally believe in God. And I wondered, have you screamed? Have you done this advice? Have you called out, Hashem, I'm drowning here in my questions, I have doubts, and you have to really scream. So, do you know how to do that? Can you imagine it? You have to imagine, and then you have to put it in your mind that that's what's happening. So let's even try that for a moment. Everybody close your eyes and think about this. Imagine you're in the middle of the ocean. The storm is raging. The waves are crashing into you. You're about to lose. You're holding on by a string. And what are you going to do? You're going to cry out. Maybe you get help. Maybe how loud would you cry out if you could scream out that maybe somebody's going to pull you in? How loud would you cry out? Can you do this? If you can't do this, this is something to ask for as well. If you do not know this experience of crying out, if you cannot let yourself find this experience, then this is necessary. He's saying a person needs to do this. This world is very dangerous. We're all going to come up with challenges. We're all going to come up with things that make us feel like we're about to drown. And we have to know how to scream out. So instead of waiting for that moment, practice. Scream out now, as if your life depended on this moment about coming closer to Hashem. And guess what? We know that this type of prayer is extremely powerful and extremely likely to get answered, and a person who screams like that will be brought to safety, the safety of proper faith and proper trust. Okay, Niratzon. Any questions or thoughts about that? Did everybody get a chance to find a silent scream in there? Yeah? Was it pretty loud? Did it shake the foundations? When I talk about the silent scream, how do you imagine a silent scream? I like to imagine a scream that is so loud that it causes an earthquake. That my voice is so loud, I imagine it traveling throughout the heavens, from galaxy to galaxy to galaxy, out throughout that until it reaches Hashem, as it were, until it reaches God. And imagine this growing louder as it goes farther, shaking each world, causing such a tremendous upheaval that it shakes the past, that Avram Avinu can feel my scream, that it shakes the future, that everything, the foundations of the universe. That's the type of scream that's very powerful. And my experience has been that when I do that, there's a tremendous opening and there's a tremendous light that is accessed through that. So highly recommended. Good piece of advice, in my humble opinion. They're all good pieces of advice. Who am I to give my humble opinion about this? My opinion truly is humble. Forgive me for even saying such a thing. Lamed. Number 30. Pam achas amadati lefanav. One time Rebbe Nachman says, I stood before Rebbe Nachman, and he was lying on his bed. And these words flew out of his holy mouth. He said like this, the main thing is, like David HaMelech said, from the belly of hell I screamed. Now this phrase, the Betin Sha'ol, now Sha'ol was translated as hell, but I also noticed that the word Sha'ol is from the same word as question. So it can be so when a person's having doubts, again, it's a form of hell. Sha'ol is a question. I have questions about God. So I scream, the way to get your questions answered, the way from the belly of those doubts to scream. And he says that's the main thing. Rebbe Nachman says that's the main thing. To find those places where we're stuck in the lowest places in hell, in the question of maybe there's no hope, in the question of maybe God's not there for me, and scream out. Vayan b'sefer alalim u'tshufan. See in the book of the Leaves of Healing that Rebbe Nachman, again, his letters mostly to his children, to encourage them to serve Hashem and follow Rebbe Nachman's advice. Shemidi sham hadibur hazeh. The Rebbe Nachman brings this statement from Rebbe Nachman, and he writes there in this language: V'kol echad nofel b'dato kol kach. And everybody has times when they fall in their awareness so much, ad shednimelo ki'ilu alav lo nemar zois, that he thinks that I've fallen so far. This doesn't even like I'm even lower than that. There's no hope for me. There's no reason for me to call out. Nothing's going to come of it. There's no reason for me to scream to Hashem. I'm so far down, it's not going to help. That's what he says, that people can many times fall so far in their awareness of the truth of Hashem's presence that they think that these words of calling out to Hashem from the depth of hell doesn't apply to me. That he like fell down lower than the belly of hell, God forbid. And as if he doesn't have any powers to scream anymore. Or he feels like maybe I've screamed so much and it doesn't help. Like that's another piece of broken faith that will come out. That it's a person, I prayed so much, it didn't help. And lots of excuses to give up like these. Really it's not true. Rav Nachman says, I know the truth. Because Rebbe Nachman was talking about all of us, no matter what level. And this pertains to each and every one of us, that the main thing is to always scream out, no matter what. And to not forget to do it. Because it's easy to know this idea, but not actually do it. Because you know what? It's not comfortable. I'd rather be numbed out and not in touch with my pain of my doubts than to go ahead and let myself get in touch and scream it. But we all know from anybody who's done this, has experience, knows that at first it's painful, but once you've really screamed it out, there's an ease and a sweetness that settles in. Agreed, everybody? Anybody disagree with that idea? Anybody who's had experience with screaming out? It's hard to do because it hurts. But once you do it, and there's so much ease, and it's way better to face the pain and to serve Hashem through the pain than to let that build up and keep numbing out, because that causes all sorts of problems, health problems, relationship problems, etc. Okay, maybe this is a good place to pause. We started very late, and should we go on, or do you want to take a break here? What do I hear from you?
It's not so long.
We can go on a bit.
We can go on a bit. So it says, the next one it says low. No, 31 is low. It's lamed aleph. It says no. All right, but we're going to anyway. Low. 31. It says like this. Each and every one of us has different specific activities. That each and every one of us, we have certain things, we have lots of things that are similar for every body in Am Yisrael, and every human being has to conduct themselves in a certain way. But each and every person has their own unique tikkun, their own unique rectification for their soul, their own unique fixing for whatever they might have blemished in this or a previous lifetime. So each one of us has unique things. However, but he bodedut, the act of making yourself alone with Hashem and spilling forth your conversation before Hashem each and every day, and in your own language that you speak, that zehu hanhagat klalis. This is a general way of conducting oneself that everybody should ascribe to. He says, that every Jew really is obligated to do this each and every day of his life. And not as some people might say, well, what makes you think that prayer is the only weapon, is the main weapon that you're supposed to use, and maybe his way of dealing with his doubts is some other way. And no, it's saying right here, our sages say, Rebbe Nachman says, the main way, yes, there are individual things, but everybody must cry out and call out and speak out to Hashem in order to come to the truth, in order to come to the good. Now he's going to say there's another good thing that you can do to make clarity for yourself. If you should learn Shulchan Aruch every day, the halacha, the laws of halacha. Rebbe Nachman advises and that you learn, that each of us learn at least two halachic sections of Shulchan Aruch, two pieces of Shulchan Aruch every day. Zehu gam ken hanhaga klalis. This is a general way of conducting that everybody should do. Kinis kaleel, as we said earlier, as Rebbe Nachman said in Likutei Moharan in another place. Zeh, Yefeh. And he says also that these two things, calling out to Hashem and learning halacha, are interdependent, because when we learn halacha, learning halacha does two things. One is that we know what to do. You want to know how to serve Hashem, you want to know how to refine your actions so that you're more and more according to the will of Hashem, halacha. But more than that, when you learn halacha, you actually clarify the channels. Learning halacha causes a sifting so that you can become more and more clear in your mind of what's true and what's false, as a general ability. And that's why they're interdependent, because if you're learning halacha, then your words of hitbodedut will come out more clear and more concise and more directed. And also, if you're doing hitbodedut, you will be able to understand and integrate halacha more effectively. Yeah, we'll do one more. Lev, Lamed Beis. Amar. He said, "Bivadai nimtzaim kesherim afal pi she'en lam yizbodedut." He says, truthfully, there certainly are you can find holy kosher Jews that don't do hitbodedut. Aval ani koreo sam mevoalim mevubalim plutim. He says, Rebbe Nachman says, I call these they're confused and panicked. Upitom keshiyavo Mashiach, and when Mashiach shows up suddenly, v'yikru'u hasam, and he's going to call them, me'oravim u'mevubalim, they'll be all mixed up and confused because they didn't do hitbodedut. Why? Let me get to that. Let's finish the idea first. Aval misha misnaheg b'hanhaga kedosha shel hitbodedut, but one who conducts himself with this holy action of doing hitbodedut, he's going to be like a person who wakes up after sleeping. That his mind is settled and comfortable. So too will such a person who does hitbodedut, when Mashiach suddenly is announced, he'll have settled thoughts and settled awareness. Why? Anybody want to? Why would you think that would be? What about hitbodedut causes that such a difference?
Because it's real davening.
Okay, so but why would that make a person, when Mashiach is suddenly announced, boom, and he's saying that people who didn't do hitbodedut are going to be, oh my gosh, and the person who did hitbodedut is going to be saying, okay.
Well, a person doing hitbodedut is probably davening for the gula, and they're more in tune. They have a higher faith,
The more
higher level of davening, and so it's more in tune with.
Anybody
Not
else?
just academic, but also, you feel it.
Right.
You feel the gula. You don't.
You feel the gula. Oh, Rebbe Nachman
Anticipate,
says
yeah.
that. Rebbe Nachman says, by following the Rebbe Nachman's Eitz of hitbodedut, he said, for me, Mashiach came. And this is something I also kind of, like, again, who am I? But I'll share that I had these experiences, as I can relate to the experience, that when I started recognizing that really Hashem's with me, and I can talk to Hashem, and that it's all according to Hashem's will, and everything that happens is perfect, it was like, wow, I'm so happy, no matter whether I'm comfortable or uncomfortable. For me, Mashiach came. So I think it's a similar idea. Also, what you're saying is that when a person does hitbodedut regularly, they're so used to that the unfolding of Hashem's will that nothing shocks them or surprises them. They're just at peace with whatever Hashem's unfolding in the moment, because they're used to being aware of Hashem unfolding His creation and not being attached to what are my regular, like when I don't have Hashem in my awareness, I'm very attached to the outcome of what I think and what I'm, and also the habits, what I'm used to, what I'm accustomed to, I should say, right? But when something happens important suddenly, the person who doesn't have this clear, peaceful trust will be like that. But a person who has this pure, peaceful trust that comes with Yibodedut is not going to be budged from his awareness of the perfection of Hashem and Hashem's goodness, no matter what happens. Does that make sense? This is what I understood from it. Okay. Good. I think that's a good place to pause, right? After we get to the heart of it, Lamed Beis. We'll start next week, please God. Next time we learn it with Lamed Gimel. And I bless us all to be zocha to use the weapon of the device of the sages, the device of Rebbe Nachman. The true weapon of Am Yisrael is the weapon of his voice, the weapon of prayer, to be able to battle the doubts of Amalek, the doubts of the battle of doubting and wondering if Hashem is really there, is Hashem really active, is Hashem really good, is the Torah really the divine message, the perfect message of the divine will. They would be zocha to use our words to become settled, use our hibodedut to become at peace and at ease in our lives, to the point where we can say, "For me, Mashiach came Yiratzon," and in so doing, the more of us that get that, suddenly will be the revelation in the national level, world level of Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Pei Rabbi Meir.